All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is Tuesday, January 17th, right around 8 o'clock in the a.m. And we are here for this week's installment of the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. Our guests this morning are representatives of both state and local air quality. We have Commissioner Jason Brune with the Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as Mr. Nick Zarnecki, and the lead for our community at the state level, I believe, is Mr. Jason Olds. We also have Mr. Stephen Hoke with Borough Air Quality here to discuss well, the recent announcement from the EPA relative to the state's serious implementation plan relative to air quality and components thereof. So without further ado, I will hand it over to the commissioner and his team. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Jomo, and thank you so much, everyone, for getting up early the day after Martin Luther King Day to talk about this important issue. Obviously, I've had the distinct pleasure to speak with many of you multiple times over my first 4 years on this important issue, and I'm excited to bring you all together again to talk about the next steps. I was happy to see for at least 4 more hours Representative Grier-Hopkins still representative on the call. Also saw Dermot Cole and many others of you that are here. Thank you for coming out. Also want to thank my team, Jason Olds and Nick Zarnecki, who are going to be talking about the details of this. And of course, Stephen, who is once a DECer, always a DECer. We're very happy that he's with the borough now. And as I've always said, we're in this together. The progress that the communities of Fairbanks and North Pole have made on the air quality issue over the course of the last decade have been phenomenal. As you know, this is a wood smoke issue. 85 to 90% of the PM 2.5 issue is, and this isn't just Jason saying it, this is the scientists that say this, is from wood smoke. And so as we've argued over and over and over again with the EPA, we want them to focus on wood smoke. Within a year of me being in this position, we had the serious SIP submitted. My team believed that the BACT and BACM and other measures that we proposed to put in place at that time would have brought us to attainment, frankly, by 2025. And we were eagerly awaiting for the EPA to approve that SIP. We submitted a year after we submitted our original SIP, we submitted an amendment to the SIP. And again, the EPA continued to drag its feet. Yes, I will be honest that DEC, the state, the borough, we waited to submit the SIP at the onset, but it was eventually done. We wanted to make sure we understood the issues and that we had the models that we thought could get us to attainment. And again, we did. As you will all have seen, unfortunately, the EPA rejected that SIP last week. We do have an opportunity, though, to try to submit additional data and to refute what they are their proposed rejection. They did approve certain components of it, but certain components they did not. First and foremost, I want to say, we want the people of Fairbanks and North Pole to have clean air. Protecting human health and the environment is our #1 priority at DEC. And again, we believe the measures that have been put in place to protect human health and the environment are more than adequate, and they've been working. We've gone from 135 to the low 60s with the measures in North Pole, and the Fairbanks numbers are down around 30-ish. 30 to 35 range. So we're and the range for the EPA is 35, and we've done yeoman's work to get us to that point. And to many of you, the measures that we put in place, thank you. We're requiring dry wood. We're requiring a switch in home heating fuels, but the EPA again doesn't think that's enough. One of the big concerns, obviously, is the certification that the EPA is supposed to be doing for wood stoves. What we've found through the research that our team, together with NESCOM, has done is that that certification program with the EPA is effectively broken. The when you're told the stove is going to be emitting a certain amount of particulate per hour, and you're replacing old bad stoves with what you think are new great stoves that emit much less, but they turn out to be bright and shiny new stoves that are emitting just as much or more particulate, that's a bad thing. And that's something that the EPA is responsible for certifying and auditing that program. We raised the issue and it elevated so high that they did an Office of the Inspector General report, investigation. We had folks from 4 different regions of the EPA fly to Fairbanks last year about this week. And we met with many of you. We met with the mayor. They got to see an inversion, which was fantastic firsthand. And that Inspector General report is supposed to be coming out expeditiously. We are going to be looking very closely at the results of that and taking all measures that we need to take to make sure that we're pushing EPA to address that issue. Again, 85 to 90% of the issue with the air quality in Fairbanks is wood smoke. The best available control technology for the large point source folks that is proposed to be put in place, several $100 million worth of upgrades to systems that they, as the Inspector General's office saw, and as all of you see, is above the inversion layer. We have been adamant that that is not the leading cause of the issue. We've also been adamant with the fact that we understand Alaska way better than the people in Seattle or Washington, D.C. do. Working collaboratively with the stakeholder group, with FEDC, with the chamber, with the point source folks, we have put a plan together that will get us to attainment, that will bring clean air. What I need you all to do, and again, as I told folks before, I'm on until 8:30, and then Nick and Jason are going to be here after I have another appointment. But I will meet with you at any point in the future. Jason and Nick will meet with you, but we need you to engage. We have 60 days to comment. We need to get the science to the EPA to help them make an informed decision. We are working on a sulfur precursor determination, which is showing all the more how our science is going to get us to attainment. We're very confident about that, and we're going to have that predetermination information submitted to the EPA within that 60-day comment period. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who's going to talk about the proposed power plant controls and the ultra-low sulfur diesel requirements that the EPA is proposing to not accept. And again, happy to take questions at any point, Jomo, if folks want to interrupt, or if you want me to just turn it over to Jason, 6 and 1, half dozen the other, just tell us how to proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Okay, so for the good of the order, just to remind everyone, this is for our community's benefit. This is for your benefit. So if at any point during the conversation you have any questions, you have any comments, please throw up your hand. To go ahead and just take yourself off of mute and fire away. You can go ahead and put questions in the chat box. I am monitoring it. Okay, so again, just to remind everyone, this is for you. Second, I went ahead and put a link to the EPA's website where they have the news press release relative to their announcement. And so just know that that link is there, and hopefully that will guide you to the report itself, which is, I believe, robust. And then finally, we do have a question from Ms. Patrice Lee to start us off.
Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for meeting with us today.
Hi, Patrice.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk with us about the alpaca study, the study where the 50 scientists came to Fairbanks last winter, just shortly after this time, and conducted extensive tests with regards to what stays, what goes up in the air, what comes down, what stays, and where it stays. And then secondly, could you give us a brief update on enforcement, maybe specifically, or get back with us on how many notices of violation have gone out in the last 2 years? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Patrice. That alpaca study is phenomenal, bringing scientists together from around the world to talk about the air quality issues has been amazing. As I've always said, we need to have science as the foundation of all of our decisions. And so it's been fantastic to have the collaborative efforts of those scientists. We had a presentation from the alpaca group to DEC staff. We had a lunch and learn. Over 100 folks from DEC participated. And I know that this is a multi-year study that they are conducting. So I think their results have not been published yet, but it is information that we're monitoring very closely. With respect to enforcement, obviously, that's a big damn deal. You can't have the requirements that we put in place for the non-attainment days and the no burn days unless we're enforcing it. And we've taken that very seriously. We have a 3-strike philosophy. We want to make sure that we're being a kinder, gentler DEC. So we, when we have our folks go out and we see that folks are burning on non-attainment days, we send them a letter. We remind them because, you know, there's a lot of folks that are either from the military or that are new to Fairbanks that may not know. Obviously, we all know because we've been addressing this issue for the better part of decades, but they may not know. So we send them a letter and we tell them, hey, we noticed you were burning. If you can't, if you have a need for a no ash waiver, no alternative source of heat, we'd love to help you apply for that. And we give them the information for that. Otherwise, we want to make sure that they're aware of our social media page and the other opportunities to learn when you're not supposed to burn. We're putting a sign up, a couple of signs actually up on the highways to indicate when the no burn days are. But then that second, if we see them burning on a second day, we send them yet another letter. We give them as much encouragement as possible. But on that third time, and that's over multiple years, if they, and good morning, Representative Prax, I just saw you joined as well. On the third day, the third time, then we do issue notices of violation and offer what's called an ESA, expedited settlement agreement. We do not have ticket writing authority at DEC. So any kind of NOVs that we give have to go through the Department of Law. That whether or not we have that right to give tickets or not has been discussed many times by the legislature. And I know obviously that was one of the big issues with the Fairbanks North Star Borough about why that initiative ended up passing to eliminate that function from the borough. We don't have that authority at DEC to write tickets, but we can issue notices of violation and then hope that there's an expedited settlement agreement. A couple of those have been settled and payments have been made to the state. And we are currently, for the ones that have not been paid, we are evaluating our legal options to potentially bring those to through the legal system. So Patrice, hopefully that answers your question. Speaking of the legal system, I'll let you know that there were a number of organizations that did sue the EPA for not finalizing this SIP in a timely fashion. We did intervene in that case, asked to intervene, and just last week we're given authority by the judge to be able to intervene. Which is fantastic. Obviously, the EPA has an unfortunate history of suing and settling with like-minded organizations. There are people that come from the ENGO community who go and work for the EPA and vice versa. And what we've seen in many jurisdictions is that those folks will bring a lawsuit, and then their old pals in the EPA will settle with them at the Department of Justice. And we did not think that was appropriate. We did not think that they would be acting in the best interest of Fairbanks and North Pole residents. So we said we want to bring Alaska's perspective, not Seattle's perspective, not Washington, D.C.'s perspective, but Alaska's perspective to that case. And we were granted that status. And we look forward to obviously representing the people of Fairbanks and North Pole and making sure that our perspective is heard and that they understand that we have the best interest of making sure we're protecting air quality, improving air quality, protecting human health and the environment, but at the same time not putting in draconian measures that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, that will cost individuals thousands of additional dollars through the addition of ULSD, as well as increased utility prices with very limited to no added benefit to the environment. This is a wood smoke issue. We need to make sure we're holding the EPA to that same standard that they're trying to hold us. Yeah, I see someone post, yes, there is local entities that are plaintiffs in that case as well, but there's national and of course EPA, national ENGOs and EPA. And so we were wanting to make sure that Alaska's perspective from the state of Alaska was heard, and we were granted that status. And we look forward to making sure that the perspective of the agency is heard in that case. So hopefully, Patrice, that answers your question. Jomo, any others?
Yes, I do see a hand up for Mr. Florence.
Good morning, Commissioner Brune. Boy, you're doing a great job of making clear statements, and I think I speak for everybody to say that we appreciate that very much. It's great to hear the strong response from DEC and crystal clear. So thank you very much. Now for a hard question. So we're all going to make comments on this proposed rule, but from the EPA's perspective, they're just enforcing the Clean Air Act. What else do you think we can do? I mean, we can't sue them to make them not enforce it. Do they even have discretion? I mean, how do we get to a win here?
Lou, I think we have gotten to a win in that we have improved the air quality so much in the last decade. We need to be, frankly, patting ourselves on the back. There have been huge sacrifices that folks in North Pole and Fairbanks have made. Not being able to burn on certain days, having to pay extra to switch the type of fuel oil, and so many other things. The education that we've done has been significant. So again, I don't want to not give us credit. We've definitely gotten improved air quality, and that is a win. With respect to this issue, everything, Lou, is on the table. Right now, because the SIP is not finalized, it's in the comment period, and then the EPA is going to take the comments over the 60 days, and they're going to see if they can make any changes, and then they will come with a final determination. At that point, the state of Alaska will have the opportunity to litigate, and we are definitely looking at that if indeed it comes to that. We're hoping that the EPA comes to its senses, sees what we're going to be submitting, sees the results of the sulfur predetermination efforts that we've been, a precursor determination that we've been working on. Here's the economic impacts of switching to ultra low sulfur diesel and how that's going to cost $1 or more per gallon for every resident of Fairbanks and North Pole. That's going to have thousands of dollars of individual economic impact. And this EPA is so focused on impacts to historically disadvantaged folks. Let's talk about the environmental and social justice issues of charging everyone $1 to $1.50 more per gallon for ULSD in an area that when that isn't even a significant issue. It is an issue for sure. The sulfur that is in fuel oil does have an impact. There is no doubt. But again, the science shows 85 to 90% of the impact is from wood stoves. That's what we should be focusing on. So we are going to be staying on top of it. All litigation options are on the table. We're hoping it does not come to that. We're hoping the EPA comes to its senses. Again, concurrently, we are going to be intervening in that lawsuit, and we may very well, Luke, bring our own lawsuit on the wood stove issue contingent on what we hear from the Office of Inspector General report. We have to make sure, again, that we're holding the EPA to the same standard that they're holding us, and that they're holding the point source folks and the best available control technology that's proposed. I will say that with a couple of legislators that are on right now, this is all the more reason why we're going to need support for Governor Dunleavy's budget for the statehood defense. This is a statehood defense issue. There is no doubt that this administration at the federal level wants to eliminate coal, wants to eliminate the opportunities for economic electricity and additional benefits of the ancillary heat that goes to that. And look at the great drying and kiln that Aurora Power has put in place through that excess heat to be able to dry the wood. So we're not burning wet wood, we're burning dry wood, and that is having a significant positive impact on the air quality of Fairbanks. I also want to give huge kudos to Representative Prax. I know it didn't work in the studies that were done, but the electrostatic precipitators that we were looking at, we're looking at every single option that's available to try to improve the air quality. So I'm not writing this off yet. I think that we're going to continue to make progress, and with the science that we're putting forward, with all of the efforts that you're making with my team, and working hopefully collaboratively with the EPA going forward, because these sulfur precursor models are being developed collaboratively with EPA's Office of Research and Development. We hope to be able to, again, bring them to their senses so that they can approve the entire SIP that we've proposed.
Great. Thanks for your leadership, Jason. Appreciate it.
John Davies.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So clearly the single biggest thing with respect to wood burning is that we do have to have burn bans during times of significant inversion. What do you have data that shows how effective the burn ban program is? Are people actually following that?
Yeah, thanks, John, for that question. Absolutely, people are following it. Some are reluctant followers, some are adamant followers, and some get pissed off and burn intentionally when we have the burn bans. It's Fairbanks and North Pole we're talking about. So we know that there's a libertarian streak. Get government out of my life. That in fact, I think that there's people that might even burn tires on those days. But this is an education campaign. Obviously, we do our best to make sure that we're getting the word out about the no other alternative source of heat opportunities for those folks that need to burn wood. We obviously are trying to make sure we're educating folks about the need to burn dry wood, not wet wood, which again, huge kudos to Aurora Power for the kilns that they're putting in place. Every single cord of wood that's needed that they make is being used. So we know that there's a demand. We know that folks are paying attention, but we have to continue our educational efforts and increase the compliance that we have from folks in Fairbanks and North Pole. And we obviously are committed to working with them, but we can always do better than what we're currently doing, John.
But my question was, do you have data? Do you know, are people actually, how many people are actually complying when there's a burn ban? And is it making a difference? Because that's, I mean, you know, even the best wood stoves are 10 to 100 times more polluting than oil, for example. And so if we don't actually have that social behavior,
sure,
the SIP won't work.
So I know that my team currently is conducting a compliance rate study at the present. So we do that on an, we need to make sure that the things that we're putting forward, the requirements that we're putting forward have teeth and that they are being complied with. We are literally doing that study as we speak. We've issued a number of NOVs already this year and last year, and we'll be issuing more if we need to. In fact, we will, not if we need to, we will be issuing more NOVs. That's just, so when I get the specific details of that compliance study, John, I'll make sure I share it with Jomo and with the folks at the chamber and with the legislature. But for now, we know that compliance, that Fairbanks and North Pole residents are complying, but we know that some are not, and we need to make sure we're improving that education and working closely with organizations like yours, as well as with the base, is imperative to improving compliance.
So I don't want to, I don't want to lead the discussion. Just know that I have a starter punch list of things that everyone should be doing at every level to help us avoid the worst of EPA sanction. Ms. Lee.
Yes, Commissioner, I just wanted to make sure that for my part, I set the record straight. The people who signed on to the lawsuit to have the EPA make a non-discretionary decision, simply make a decision. We had no more input than anyone else on that decision, was the right thing to do. And I want to express my concern that we aren't getting some help we could be getting. Why should anyone pay the extra between #2 fuel and ultra low sulfur diesel? Why is the state not subsidizing that through power cost equalization? Maybe you could research into why the North Star Borough was not granted royalty gas when we asked on multiple occasions through Interior Gas Utility, and we're told it wasn't in the state's best interest. Why have we not made more progress in available renewable power sources that are available that could displace thousands and thousands of gallons of diesel fuel? I mean, we need to think out of the box to solve our problem, and we need the state to stop fighting and get on the train and help us, please.
Yeah, Patrice, thank you. And you know what? We, Citizens for Clean Air, DEC, and all the folks assembled on this call all want the same thing. We want clean air. We want to improve the air quality for residents of Fairbanks and North Pole. Our approaches for how we're going to do it, either through the legal arena or through getting our SIP approved, might be different, but we all want the same thing. And I'm committed to that same thing. I think a number of the things that you've raised with respect to power cost equalization, I think we have a couple of legislators who are on the call right now that could discuss that. Obviously, funding will be an issue for that, and a PCE is not something that DEC engages in, but I will make sure that I raise the question. As far as renewable energy is concerned, obviously, Governor Dunleavy has made it a priority that he wants to improve the amount of renewable energy that Alaska uses. He's very committed to that. We're focused on it, and I think that's a great idea. And we need to be looking not just at the renewable energy, but also the sourcing for where the minerals come for that renewable energy. We need to increase the amount of mining that occurs in Alaska so that renewable energy can be done cleanly. It's not just put your head in the sand and wonder where those minerals come from that go into those photovoltaics or that go into those wind turbines. Those usually come from third world nations that don't have strong environmental oversight. So Patrice, I think your ideas are very good. And I know all of our hearts are in the right place with respect to improving air quality. And we're going to, your ideas that you've proposed are things that we're absolutely looking closely at and will continue to.
Well, Commissioner, I see that we're getting towards the bottom of the hour. I believe you said that you had to leave for another appointment at 8:30. So with the last minute we have, Senator Wilkin.
Go ahead. Commissioner Gary Wilkin, representing Advocates for Safe Alaska Highways. We're opposed to the Kinross Hall plan. I'm bringing today a picture of the non-attainment area control zones. And I'm going to give that to Mr. Zarnecki. I'm going to give him two and hope that one reaches you. That shows that in the non-attainment zone, the ore haul, which is expected to be 192 trucks per day, weighing between 30 and 80 tons, travel 32 miles through this zone, day in and day out for decades. Two things, I'd like to know your level of knowledge of this. And the second thing, I would hope that the state of Alaska, who has been quiet, strangely quiet in this issue, and has been strangely quiet in this issue, become active and challenge the data that has been put out in the interest of why would we, after all the work that you have done and others preceding you, why would we let things like this occur that are going to do nothing but backslide? So I'm going to pass these on, and I'd like to see you engage in this and challenge the numbers that are being put out. And of course, we stand ready to help wherever we can. So thank you, sir, for being here and for your service.
Thanks, Senator. And I definitely have been watching this issue very closely. It's not novel to me. I know it's an issue that probably we could spend. We're focusing on PM 2.5 today and the non-approval of the SIP, but at a future meeting with Jomo or with others, I'm committed to coming back and discussing the issue of that mine and the proposed transportation corridor at a future meeting. So thanks, Senator, for raising that issue. And like I said, I have about 1 minute left, but I'm happy to take one final question, Jomo, and then turn it over to my able team of Jason Olds, who is our air director. He replaced Alice Edwards, who had been with the department for 30 some years, and Nick came from the borough, replaced Cindy Heil, who had been with the department for an equal amount of time. She and Alice started like 30 some years ago and were amazing assets to the state, but they fortunately, as tier 1 employees, get to retire, and I wish them all the best. We have amazing team in Jason, and Jason's been with the department for around 10 years. He oversaw our compliance section of air, and he's heard me say, and you'll all hear me say this multiple times, I tell my team, do your jobs. I don't tell them to not issue NOVs. I said, if there is a stipulation in a permit, if there is a regulation, if there is a requirement, it means nothing if we don't enforce it. So I tell them, and I give them the absolute go-ahead to enforce the requirements we put in place. We obviously want to make sure that we're giving compliance assistance when necessary to try to help people get to attainment. But if we need to issue NOVs, if we need to be the heavy, we absolutely will. And then, of course, Nick, coming from the borough with his lengthy service at the borough, we're so lucky to have him in that role. And living in Fairbanks, obviously, it's near and dear to his heart. And then again, Stephen, coming from DEC to replace Nick at the borough, I think the team we've got assembled, the additional resources that we're putting in, and you'll see that in the budget that Governor Dunleavy put forward, we've put in forward about 15% more positions for the Air Division. The Air Division has remained static number-wise for the last decade, but we are increasing the numbers predominantly to deal with issues like this, with the SIP in Fairbanks, with the regional haze SIP, and with others, as well as the monitoring that's important to understand where the pollution's coming from. Is it coming from Asia? Is it coming from Russia? Is it coming from wood burning? We need to understand the Alaska air quality issue. And so those positions have been proposed for the legislature to consider this year. And we look forward, obviously, to working closely with all of you. And in my final comment, I want to urge you all again to be active on this. Engage your colleagues, engage other organizations, and make sure your voice can be heard. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason. Jomo, thank you so much again for the opportunity, and I'll look forward to talking with many of you more in the coming months.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chabados, I do see that you had been off of mute. Do you have a question or comment, sir?
Yeah, perhaps Jason can answer this, but assuming EPA does not adopt a common sense position in its final determination, when can we expect a mandate to convert to ultra low sulfur heating oil for the interior?
I don't have an expected timeline for when I would say you would be required to convert to ultra low sulfur diesel. I think the economic analysis that we plan to put forward for the costs and benefits of switching from number one heating oil to ULSD are significantly higher with lower benefits than the previously implemented switch from number two to number one. And so I wouldn't say that that's a foregone conclusion. That's something where the state is looking to comment through this process. And we'd encourage others, if they have concerns about that issue, to comment as well. That is one of sort of two large items where I think we are disagreeing with EPA through their disapproval, that I'll let Nick talk a little bit more about some of the finer points a little bit later. There's a number of items in their proposed disapproval that are kind of what we would sum as, smaller administrative items that we can acquiesce, we can change, and we'll be commenting on what those items are and looking to file another SIP amendment or supply further information to EPA between sort of the close of public comment period and when they would issue a final action, which we're not expecting for another year. And so if ultimately the economic analysis that we do for something like switching from number one to ULSD determines that it is feasible, and that is something that the state, this is an if, would look to implement, it would be sometime down the road. Probably likely sort of the final action from EPA would be maybe a year from now is when we would first hear what they would be proposing as a final decision. This is just a proposal.
It does seem to me to a degree that we're already raging a bit against the law of diminishing returns. You mentioned the potential benefits of going to USLD from number one and how they're kind of smaller in scale than having gone from number two to number one, which was it had a price impact, but it was fairly affordable.
Yeah, we believe there's sort of an inflection point in there in terms of cost and benefit that we'll be supplying further information on that fuel switch and pricing and some of the benefits of it through this comment period for EPA to consider.
I will lob out. We do have a couple of questions in the chat box, although I would like to give Mr. Hoke and Mr. Zarnecki a chance to weigh in. So the first one is from Mr. Gary Newman. It says, I appreciate Aurora Power's dry wood program, but they're not able to meet demand. How might we expand availability of dry wood? It's always been my idea that ideally we would have a wood kiln here in town, but also one in North Pole.
Yeah, and I don't know, if there's other folks sort of from the business community on this call that would want to comment on that. I'm not a business sort of person in terms of what it would take to stand those up. I think that we have sort of through the years taken an innovative approach through targeted airshed grants to try and find better ways to get at this issue. I don't know if we've looked at expanding sort of the dry wood supply, but certainly that's something where we would hope that the private sector could step up as they did with the kiln and find an opportunity to increase that supply. It's been a great benefit to the community. We love everything that they're doing there, and I hear the concern that there's limited supply.
It is a little outside of your wheelhouse, just for the good of the order. Know everybody that it's my intention to kind of over the course of the next couple of weeks or months, kind of take this in bites, where we can look at, again, potential mitigation measures. So just know that I'm hoping to schedule those kinds of meetings as we move forward. We do have a question. Now, this is definitely in you guys' wheelhouse. How many letters of violation have been sent out this winter? How many last winter? Really trying to find the pace of enforcement.
Sure. And the commissioner kind of alluded to sort of the 3-strike policy that we've always used, where, on first contact, folks get a letter. On second contact, they get a more strict letter. And on third contact, that's when we get to what we call our NOV, or notice of violation stage, where we begin that enforcement process. Previously, I think we've had 9 up through the state's efforts beginning in 2018 to the close of last winter, with 6 in last winter. So you're seeing that increase in pace. I know we have a batch prepared that have not gone out the door yet this winter, but again, we're expecting to see very quickly a doubling or roughly redoubling of the numbers and counts that we'd seen previously. It's as that universe of folks have had contact with us, we are expecting and are seeing an increase in the pace of that enforcement action. There's never been a time, as the commissioner alluded to, on enforcement where we've been told no. The Brune rule is things go. I've never been stopped from an enforcement action. So,
Gentlemen.
All right.
if there's no other, I'm not necessarily monitoring the chat, but I did just want to briefly bring up sort of the power plant controls in this, again, proposed disapproval. We see sort of the controls that the state had put forward are best available control technologies for the stationary sources, the big power plants. We see the EPA disapproving of those proposed controls that we put forward in our plan, and instead more stringent and expensive controls. This is another area where we would propose putting forward additional information for EPA to consider, that I'll let Nick walk through some of the finer points on in a little bit, but essentially we're at that same sort of point of diminishing returns. We feel like for what is majorly a wood smoke issue, the cost of the controls that the EPA has put forward in this proposal, we don't necessarily agree as being economically feasible for the benefits. And with that, unless there's other questions, I'm happy to field those, but I would pass to Nick.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason, and thanks everybody for joining us. I really want to go over kind of.
Oh, actually, may I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm just 1 second. We did get a note in the chat box. Aurora Energy Solutions has made the investment to purchase a second kiln and have already poured the foundation for it.
That's fantastic.
Yep. Construction of the second kiln will begin this summer.
I didn't want to speak for them, but yes.
Okay. And we anticipate being able to produce 8 to 9 cords of dry.
1,000 cords.
Oh, yeah, 1,000 cords between the kilns. Excellent. Nick, please.
Okay, thank you. And that was a fantastic update. Thank you, Lisa. So I want to go over kind of 2 things really quickly. I want to go over what is really in the disapproval so that folks in the community can understand what is in the disapproval. And then I want to talk about something that Lou kind of hinted on, and that's really what is our strategy moving forward and how to best comment so that EPA will listen to the needs of the community. So first of all, what is in the disapproval? We've talked about back on the best available control measures. The ultra low sulfur diesel requirement is one of the big ones that Jason just talked about. There's requirements for wood cellars that are going to be disapproved, coal-fired heating devices, some things in the regulations, some things with small commercial sources, coffee roasters, char broilers, used oil burners. They disapproved weatherization. What we did for that control measure, and mobile sources. The kind of nitty gritty of it, we don't have time at this meeting, but I'm more than happy to get in to answer folks' questions if you have them on why exactly EPA is disapproving pieces of that. And then with BACT, there's a couple of important things. There's a lot of the sulfur dioxide controls for the major point sources. For GVEA, Aurora, UAF, and Fort Wainwright were disapproved or proposed to be disapproved, and also what they termed the MMR, which is monitoring and record keeping requirements. Those were proposed to be disapproved, and also with incorporating pieces of this, incorporating permit conditions into the SIP. So there's more for the point sources than just the SO2 control measures. There's also a contingency measure section that EPA is proposing to disapprove that says our contingency measures are not adequate. And then there's a bunch of sections that are dependent on the control strategy that are that EPA is proposing to disapprove because they can't approve the control strategy. That's the attainment demonstration, reasonable further progress, motor vehicle emission budgets, and quantitative milestones. So there's a lot that's in this proposed disapproval that we need to address. And so how do we do that? What is our path to number one, cleaning the air, number two, getting an approvable SIP so that this community doesn't face sanctions in a federal implementation plan? Part one is the comments. We need to get as much as the community to comment on this, and whatever their thoughts are, just make sure that your voice is being heard. This is the time to make sure that your voice is being heard with EPA. And the comments, we can provide additional data on any of those sections that EPA is proposing to disapprove. We can also provide comments that support EPA on the portions that they're proposing to approve, and a bunch of those different things. The second part is that DEC is working on a SIP amendment, because some of these items that EPA is proposing to disapprove, there is a big gap between where EPA is and where DEC is. That's with ultra low sulfur diesel and the SO2 controls on the point sources. And so we can't get there by just submitting comments. We need to do a SIP amendment, which includes this sulfur precursor determination. And that's longer than the comment period. Comment period closes in 60 days on March 13th, and we're shooting for about a year to prepare this SIP amendment, because it has to do we have to do a lot of technical modeling, and it has to go through and then it has to go through DEC's public comment period. And so there's some important pieces there. And I think if folks take away one thing in their comments that they should do when they're commenting the EPA, it's that there is a lot of information out there. There's the alpaca study, there's the a bunch of modeling updates. EPA is basing their decision on a model that is outdated with 2008, some 2008 data. We need to let EPA know that there is a new model that's out there, that there's new data, and that EPA needs to pause this decision while this compelling new information comes in that includes a sulfur precursor determination. So that's kind of our message, is that we need EPA to hold off while we look at the latest science and get the best information in front of them. And so I did want to just take some time to address some of the questions that were out there. Patrice, with your question on alpaca, we definitely are working with alpaca and working with Bill Simpson. And I know that at the technical level, alpaca is working with EPA's Office of Research and Development, and they are working to incorporate some of alpaca's work into the latest model release of CMAQ that we're trying to use for the SIP. And so we are absolutely working on incorporating the latest science at all levels.
We enjoy being able to connect that group with the EPA.
Yeah, and so that is, very, very important that we're working on. And then, John, to your question on the compliance rate, John Davies, your question on the compliance rate study. What we put in the SIP is that we would have about 30% compliance with the curtailment program in 2019, and that would ramp up to about a 45% compliance rate in 2024. That's what our attainment demonstration was based on. And as Commissioner Brune noted, we are trying to actually quantify those numbers right now to get good data to show whether or not we are indeed on track with those numbers. But then I will stop there and I will see if anybody has any questions right now on either specific items that are in the proposed disapproval or what DEC's strategy is to, get an approvable SIP and clean the air.
I would open the floor to questions. Dermot.
Yes, I wonder if you could clarify what you just said about the compliance rate. Does that mean that in 2019 there was 70% non-compliance? And that, anyway, I'm confused about what you said and what the current level is. If it indeed is a majority of people that are not complying, that doesn't speak very well to this. And I think the public really needs a better explanation from the state on enforcement, what it consists of. If it's simply a letter to people saying, we noticed a violation, then that's not enforcement.
How does the state even know that someone has violated?
I think I'll address Mr. Cole's question first, and then jump into your question, Jomo. And so the 30% compliance rate in 2019 is stated in the SIP, and what it means is that this is a control measure that focused on wood stoves, and we needed to estimate how effective that control measure was based on engineering judgment and where we were at in the SIP process. We assumed a compliance rate of 30, and then we ramped that compliance rate up over the years between 2019 and 2024 to show how, as Jason noted, as the years go on, that we will get better at compliance and that we expect it to go up. I do want to note that EPA has told us repeatedly that they believe that the highest compliance rate we can claim in the SIP is about 50%, and that EPA won't accept anything over a 50% compliance rate. And so we are just basically playing by EPA's rules with where we think the number of people are. And that's why we're spending some resources to go out and actually quantify this number so that we can know and we can share that with everybody else what the actual compliance rate is. And then to your question,
I think I'm still confused about that. Are you saying then that 70% of the people burning wood are not complying, or are you saying that this strategy gets you 30% of the way to attainment? I don't think
we're saying that we were saying in that in the base year that 70% of the people were not complying, correct? And then as we go on, we're projecting that by 2024, that we can have 45% of the people complying and 55% of the people not complying. And according to EPA, that's about the best that we can do with that control measure.
And is that, does EPA say that because DEC has no enforcement capabilities and has not asked the legislature for enforcement capabilities? Is that why?
No, that is based on two factors. One is it's not enforcement, it's how accurate can you forecast and predict the inversions. And so EPA is counting in that compliance rate that there are going to be some inversions that are missed. And then the other piece is, the enforcement and how effective enforcement can actually be. And EPA has determined, and it's in this proposed action, that EPA has determined that the state of Alaska has the necessary authority to enforce this program. And that's a piece that EPA is proposing to approve.
Hey, John, you're going to be next, but if I may, Nick, I think you answered my question, because my original question was, when we're talking about compliance, is it the kind of stove that someone has in their home? Or is it the way they're using the stove and when? And it sounds like when we're talking about this 30 versus 50%, we're assuming that it's a cleaner device. And the question is whether or not people are burning when they're not supposed to be burning the way they're not supposed to, and when they're not supposed to. I'm going to make an admission right now, because I said it before the assembly. I'm part of the problem. I have 2 pellet stoves banging away right now. And I'm not necessarily closely monitoring the air quality alerts. And I've only gone home once over the time that I've owned the pellet stoves to turn them off midday. So I recognize that I am part of the problem and that I need to be part of the solution.
Yes, and so this particular control measure is talking about the curtailment program, which is specifically dealing with when it is forecasted that we will see high pollution rates. DEC issues air quality alerts, and they're either stage 1 or stage 2, and they tell people with varying degrees that you cannot use solid fuel heating appliances. And a stage 2, no matter how clean it is, unless you have that no ash waiver, you're supposed to turn off your solid fuel burning appliance. And that's the particular control measure we're talking about here. There's a whole suite of control measures, which EPA is actually proposing to approve. The wood stove control measures, that part of the SIP they find acceptable.
And would the 50% really be from their own historical research on compliance rates generally for Americans in these situations?
Again, it's 2 parts. It's how accurately can you forecast when you're going to have these inversions and high pollution events. And then the second is how well that you can actually affect behavior change within the community. And with those 2 variables, that's what EPA has told us, is that 50% is about the highest compliance rate you can get from this control measure.
On a credit basis.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
John.
Yeah, my impression is that when we're talking about compliance, we're talking about actual compliance with a request to stop burning.
Mhm.
And that's the fundamental thing. And it's my also further impression that that's the only thing that can work, is if we have a significant rate of compliance, if people are going to continue to burn wood. In other communities, they've just flat out banned wood because of the problem. I mean, wood burning, I agree with you, is a significant part of the problem. I don't, however, asterisk here, think it's the whole problem. I think that there's lots of other pieces to it, but clearly it's the biggest piece. And if people are going to continue to burn wood when there's an inversion, we're never going to get compliant. We're never going to get clean air. And so that's just the fundamental bottom line in this whole thing. We got to have compliance. And the last thing is, it's my impression, I don't have the exact data, but it's my impression that when we were looking at this early on, and we looked at the compliance rate down in Juneau when they would have red flag events down there, that they were getting 95% compliance, that, you know, they were actually policing it. Juneau has police power. They were actually going out in the neighborhoods, and people realized that if they were burning wood when the red flag was up, they were going to get dinged, and they had compliance rates way north of 50% is my recollection. Now, I may be wrong about that, but that's my recollection.
So that was part of how Juneau cleaned up their, because they were a non-attainment area as well. Does that match what you know, Nick?
I don't know the specific compliance rates in Juneau, but I know that Jason has his hands up, and I think Jason might be able to speak to this.
Yeah, and the issue in Juneau, there was a lot of Woodstoke. There are still those curtailments. It's still what they call a maintenance area, but it's for PM10, which, you know, it probably was mostly PM2.5 and some dust issues. And so it was a little bit different situation. When we look at Fairbanks and we look at the issue being majority wood smoke for sure, you know, absolutely, we are trying to change hearts and mind. We want compliance. That's not to say that 50% is insignificant. That seems reasonable based on sort of these SIPs that EPA approves. There are other enforcement measures beyond the sort of curtailment burn ban. Those aspects are something that we have also conducted enforcement with. And that has to do with either, you know, uncertified devices or sale of certain uncertified devices in the area. There's a lot that we do. There's more to those kind of control measures than just the curtailments, but that is obviously the big one. And we have seen a reduction in the measured PM2.5 pollution in both Fairbanks and North Pole over time. So that tells us that, you know, some of these measures are working. We have more work to do still, but absolutely we are trying to address sort of the hearts and minds, get to the root of getting people to comply, as that does have a significant impact. Cleaner devices, more adherence to those curtailments. That's obviously something that we're trying to do through messaging or otherwise. And it's a difficult task, but we do certainly have that enforcement ability. There were some questions early on about kind of what that looks like and what measures there are. What we've discussed as sort of the citation or administrative penalty authority is something that DEC does not have, but what we have is civil penalty authority. And so what we advance through the notice of violations are, as the commissioner referenced earlier, the expedited settlement agreement, which essentially those cases go into a queue for, we can file a complaint in civil court and address sort of folks' non-compliance that way. That's something we're constantly looking at. But in the meantime, the expedited settlement agreement that people get is sort of a settlement that we won't do that if they pay sort of that small penalty that we put forward. So functionally, it arrives and some folks have settled out, much like a ticket or a citation, though legally it's not the same device or authority.
Rep Prox?
Yeah, thank you, Jomo. I just wanted to point out, in defense of the folks out in the North Pole area, it costs a bunch of money. If you're able, or if you have wood, you have to convert to oil-fired heat. In my case, it was just the garage. It's about $1,500 a year. For me, that's really no big deal. And in fact, I don't have the time to go out and get wood now anyway. But for many, many residents, this is a big deal. And it's not just $1,500 a year. It might be $2,000 or $3,000 a year, money out of their pocket. And there's just quite a few people out in that area that really, that's a big deal to them. That's hard for them to comply with. And I'm sure there's some that are just being obnoxious, but the rest of the community kind of has to appreciate that not everyone else can afford to do everything we can do, and be sensitive to that, and then start working on some other stuff that we might be able to do to clean the air up. And that that means improving. Like, I'm just really thankful that Aurora Energy went on, took the initiative for dry wood. That is just, that's a win-win for everybody. And keep looking at those sort of things. What can we do to help each other out? Clean this up on our own, not forcing our neighbors, working with our neighbors, not depending on the heavy hand of the EPA to come in just to solve our problem for us. We got some people, understandably, the health, other people, economics. It's a big deal. Got to consider that.
That's one of my big overarching concerns with the EPA's position, and that it seems to be underpinned by an assumption that cost is not an object, that we can just afford everything, and that it's all sticks and no carrots.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate what Representative Prax is adding to this conversation. As a reminder, what the state put forward in its plan, as this is sort of developed with consideration from that stakeholders group and sort of the local concerns and trying to address something at that local level, provide that input. We acknowledge that there's a strong desire to continue to burn wood. Folks need that in this community. And so coming up with a solution and approach that allows folks to continue to have those devices is something that we are strictly trying to do. And so through the reductions that we've seen and the hope that we can continue to push that, we're hoping that we can get to a place where, you know, even if someone's being obnoxious or they feel that they need to burn wood in violation of a curtailment, you know, they're able to stay warm while, you know, if we have significant numbers, if we see continued improvement, we'll be able to reach a point of attainment where those folks that need to can continue to burn.
Ms. Lee, and then you, John.
I want to thank Representative Prax because Citizens for Clean Air's motto has always been clean air and warm homes. And I'd like to suggest that we had the stakeholders group with everybody represented. We got together some years ago, made the list of things, and some of those things have just been pushed by the wayside. And one of them was subsidized electric heat during bad air days. There have been many, many things. I would like to see you revisit that list of stakeholder requests. My next would be, does the state have a strategy or plan for how they'll defend to the EPA their refusal to grant citation authority? They've been asked over and over. I myself have written at least 5 times pleading for citation authority so we could get a better handle on how big the problem is and push more for some subsidies for our community. We shouldn't be paying one more penny in this community when we know what is given to oil companies, what's given to power cost equalization. Where's something for us?
I can't necessarily speak to the subsidy aspects. Again, I know there are some legislators here on the call and some of those measures that may be addressed through other entities. I think the citation authority, as far as a plan we would have, you know, as we continue to proceed through some of the options that are available with our current authorities, we can look at what's the cost of doing it that way? What's the cost of doing it that way versus, you know, advocating for another thing, but we don't have a final determination. We've not looked at sort of all the data that's available in terms of how necessary or effective that will be. So it is something that we're constantly looking at going forward, but I don't want to speak to what the future holds.
John?
Yeah,
Dr. Davies?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments that Patrice just made, and that's kind of where I was going to go a little bit too, is that I do think that there are lots of, and we, through that stakeholder process, explored a number of them. I suspect we didn't get them all, but for example, you know, the subsidy of electric prices, you know, that seems like, you know, for a number of people that could be an alternative source of heat that would be relatively inexpensive to install and which could be switched on and off pretty conveniently as the weather inversions come and go. And without getting significant, I'm going to just hammer this again, you can put the best possible wood stoves in, you can burn the driest wood. You still won't get compliance or get clean air if people don't stop burning when there's an inversion. Full stop, period. Now, yes, Jason, you're right. You know, if it's only a few people that are, for whatever reason, not complying, yes, we can get there with that. But I would submit that 50% is not that number. It just 50% is just flat not compliance with as a community. We have to get up into the 70 or 80% levels before that's going to be significant. So the carrots, I think that we need to explore that, and DEC should be taking a role in that. That could be part of your compliance program. If you can offer people an actual economically acceptable alternative to burning, an alternative to not complying with an episodic ban or an compliant, curtailment, then maybe it's more reasonable to be a little more insistent, because the flip side of that is, if people for whatever reason they're burning, they're causing our children and us to go to the hospital. I mean, it's just flat that way. And so this is, and I'm going to go back to Jason's comment when he's talking about the scofflaws and kind of laughing. That's not a laughing matter. This is serious. I mean, people are going to the hospital. People's children are being impacted. Their cognitive development is being impacted by this. We've let this problem go on for far too long in Fairbanks, and we've got to treat it with much more urgency than we have. And so things like, providing alternative source of heat is something that we really should take a look at. And if you can't do it through power cost equalization, certainly you can. There's a big tool that's already available out there. It's called LIHEAP. It's a federal program. State can contribute to it too. But if we worked with those people and said, look, if you have to put in oil or electric heat that's going to be more expensive in order to comply, we'll help you get the financial help that will make you whole if you make that switch. And that program's really in place right now. It's called LIHEAP.
Well, I think for sort of incentives and some of the tools that are available as far as conversions or other opportunities, that's where we've looked traditionally to the targeted airshed grants, sort of what authorities are there or abilities to incentivize or subsidize. While that doesn't all sit within DEC, it is something that we continue to pursue. I know that Nick has a lot of background with those, and so I might defer to him on some of the topics that can or can't be approved through that process. And absolutely, the scofflaws, as you put it, is not a laughing matter in the masochistic sense that this is something I take incredibly serious. It is my job. It is something that has been a passion and a project for myself for many years, my entire career. We don't take that lightly. The 50% measure, sort of what EPA has approved and what is sort of a significant amount of compliance and what we are able to achieve. That is why we're looking to something like the compliance rate study. That is why we are looking at continually increasing our enforcement activities. That is sort of the goal, is to get the maximum achievable compliance. But I don't want to put a number on it just because I don't know what the compliance rates were that Juneau saw. I know that it was sort of a multi-pronged issue, and that in Fairbanks, we are seeing significant reductions, and in North Pole, and we're looking to continually improve that. And so, it's a very serious matter. It's something that I understand and have at times become emotional myself over sort of the hardships that people face. And we want clean air. That is our goal. That is our mission. It's something that we take dreadfully serious.
Nick?
Yes, and I just did want to point out that, yes, the big carrot that we do have for this program is sitting over there with the borough with the targeted airshed grant and the wood stove changeout program. Steve can speak to how much money is sitting in there, but it's, upwards of 17 million-ish.
Yeah, just over 17 million in targeted airshed funds and other grant monies set aside specifically for conversions, switching out these wood stoves and getting people on a different source of heat.
Yeah, because in addition to the curtailment program, part of our control strategy is to get as many community members as are willing to move away from wood heat and move over to other cleaner forms of heat. And that's where the borough's changeout program helps make that permanent change and gives us some good emission reductions. And I know we're over the time, but I just wanted, this has been some great conversation. And I just want to remind everybody here that the task at hand right now is to comment on EPA's action. And so that means that, discussions of, potentially new control measures, those aren't necessarily in EPA's proposed action. And those, we can definitely have that conversation when it comes to doing a SIP amendment. To find out what other things the community thinks will work to reduce air quality. But I think that's the second part of this. I think the first part that's first and foremost is providing EPA with comments on the SIP. And this goes for everybody in the community that actually, articulate this issue that's specific to Fairbanks. And, DEC is here. We can help people formulate their comments and direct them towards, how it's best to approach the comments. And we can also share DEC's strategy on our comments.
Well, I really do appreciate that last bit, the fact that DEC stands ready to assist. These regulatory documents can be really hard to work your way through. And as a normal citizen, it can be really hard to formulate thoughtful, impactful comments. Are you guys going to be having any further meetings on this subject where, again, citizens can do a little bit deeper dive into the EPA's response and learn a bit more so they can make those comments?
Yes, we will be having some other meetings on it. I know that we are scheduled to go in front of the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce for the Energy and Environment Committee on, I believe it's the 25th, but sure, something like that. I don't have my calendar open in front of me. But yes, we're doing that, and we're trying to engage the community in many ways. So if there are other venues that we should be at, please feel free to reach out, get the invites out, and we can make sure that we get folks to it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, well, we are around the top of the hour. I would open up the floor. More comments, questions? Again, this is for you guys, for all of us.
This is Doug Chapados for Jason Olds. Jason, we've heard and read the findings regarding the EPA certified wood stove emission rates. What is the status of that program now in terms of the paying for conversions?
This is actually a great topic for Nick. The sort of certification method that EPA had used based on the information that Alaska collected has been revoked. There are some alternative methods, and we've done some testing of stoves. That's where we have our Alaska certified list. At the federal level, I think we're all anxiously awaiting to find out what's in that Office of Inspector General's report to see what recommendations or what they have to say. There's a lot that we're not necessarily privy to about the federal program. But as far as sort of our plans and how we hope to pressurize EPA to fix that program, if there's anything else that Nick wants to add, it is a passion project of his.
Yeah, Jason, thanks. I will add that it is frustrating that we have a wood stove issue and that EPA has a national certification program that is not really functioning and it's not delivering the results that this community needs. And we have been in constant contact with EPA over the past 2.5, 3 years. Steve has been a huge part of this effort as well, in trying to identify these stoves. I would be more than happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you, but the big picture is EPA knows there's a problem. The federal solution, which is what we need because Alaska does not have the resources to run a certification program, looks to be about 10 years out because they have to develop new test methods, do a bunch of testing to develop new standards, open a national new source performance standard, and then get that pushed through. And then there's, the time that industry takes to actually implement and develop those new stoves and get them to market. So all in all, we're looking at 10 years for that to happen. The state of Alaska is looking at interim solutions to identify and bring the cleanest appliances into this community. And so it is something that we are working very diligently on. And again, I can have a more in-depth conversation if you would like to.
I'd just like to add to the change out program only uses the Alaska DEC's approved list when installing devices, solid fuel burning devices, which is a very limited subsect of what we do at the change out program.
Thank you.
Mike Kraft. Oh, sorry, Doug.
Well, I was just thanking them for their responses.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mike Kraft. Sorry, we can't hear you, Mike. All right, let's take John and we'll circle back around, Mike.
Just one other last thing. I'm sorry to take up too much time here, but the one other thing that we can do to help people is to help them run devices that will clean up the air in their homes. This can help during inversion periods, but can also help in the summertime during forest fire events. And so there are cost-effective ways to filter the air inside your home so that at least your house can be a refugium during these periods of pollution. And that's another area where we could use the state's help in getting these kinds of solutions into people's houses.
Good call. I recall that when they first implemented the AHFC home energy retrofit and rebate program, even though pretty much all of the reports from the energy raters included a recommendation that people install HVAC systems, or heat recovery HRC systems. The original program didn't actually cover or allow for reimbursement of those air handling systems. It took it actually wasn't added. So yeah, I think that's a really good call, John. Filtration systems. So I do have, again, I made a starter list of things everybody can do. So thank you very much for this conversation, because I've actually added a couple of things to this list. Just know, again, it is my intention over the course of the next several weeks or months to do deeper dives in both, again, the EPA's response, but also what the mitigation measures might be and how viable they are to help us with our air quality challenge. So just know that. Starting with, I'll be reaching out to you, Steve, so that we can get a deeper dive on the change out program and the resources therein. Reach out to Mr. Chapados as well as Marathon to see what the state's capacity for the production of ultra low sulfur diesel is, and whether it can we can meet that demand, that increased demand under USLD, and what the price impact might be, and the list goes on. So just for the good of the order, please know I already have a couple of meetings scheduled. I had scheduled Solarize Fairbanks for an update next week. So just know that we'll be doing Solarize. However, I did get a reach out from our friends over at the Interior Gas Utility. We mentioned, again, it's one thing to tell people they can't burn wood. It's something else for them to have a viable alternative for their space heating. So we'll be getting an update from IGU that is currently scheduled for February 7th, and I'll be looking for something to fill the gap on January 31st. All right, well, guys, yes, Nick.
Just one last comment reminder for everyone. The comment period is open through March 13th, and EPA will be traveling to Fairbanks to have a public hearing in person. That is yet to be scheduled, but I would expect mid to late February on that.
All right, well, members can expect that as soon as we have a date and time for that public hearing, we will be forwarding it to the group. All right, well, gentlemen, again, I would offer, open up the floor to any final comments or questions. All right, or any final statements? Mr. Olds, thank you so much for your work and thank you for being online. Mr. Zarnecki, Mr. Hope, thank you all very much for being here. Any summations, guys?
We're here to answer questions and
Okay.
work through this together.
Yes. And the borough's working closely with the state to ensure that local interests are represented.
Or represented. Outstanding. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Please know again that I did record this meeting as I customarily do. I will be uploading it to our YouTube page and I'll be distributing the recap. Again, I know this was a lot of information. I was furiously scribbling notes, but I know I didn't catch everything. So know that again, the recording will be forthcoming for anyone who wants to review the discussion. All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much. Hope everyone had a great King holiday. Hope everybody has a great rest of your Tuesday and great rest of your week. And we will see you next Tuesday for the Energy for All Alaska Task Force.